can't wait to share this with you. My guest tonight is Dr. Johan Calleman, and I have been wanting to interview him for a very long time. Some of you know, most of you know who listen to my show, that one of my favorite guests is Barbara Hand Clouse. She comes on periodically. And Carl a lot of his work is the foundation of Barbara's work. She has built a lot of theories and wonderful books that work very, very cooperatively and co-creatively and complementary with Dr. Calleman's work. So I have always really wanted to have a conversation, and I get to do that tonight. So I'm a very happy woman. First of all, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me again. If you missed my interview with Kathy Pasquale last week, it's in the archives. We talked about our 9/11 visitation, and I shared a little bit of my Tesla, my night in Tesla's room, and so it's there in the archives if you'd like to download it and listen to it. We're going to get right to it because we have a lot of material to cover. Dr. Calleman has released a new book, The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, a novel theory of our origins, and it is a tremendous, I have to say this, one of the most extraordinary books that I have read in a long time. It covers a vast amount of material. It goes into pretty much everything I've ever talked about on the show for the most part, one way or the other. And I have to say it's a trilogy. It's one of three. And if you'd like to check out his work and the things that he has coming up, you can go to his website, Calleman.com. That's CALLEMAN.com. Those links are also right here on my homepage here at Achieve Radio. He started out as a scientist, and he's got a fascinating background. His first phase of life was training and practicing as a professional scientist from 1974 to 93. He got a PhD in physical biology under the mentorship of a member of the Nobel Prize committees, exposing him to a high level of international science. I have some questions about the Ebola virus, if maybe he'll answer some things tonight. And then later he was a senior researcher at the University of Washington, where he wrote a number of extensive quoted articles in the scientific literature in the fields of environmental science, chemistry, and cancer research. The second phase of his life began around 1993 and was dedicated to understanding the ancient Mayan calendar and its underlying mechanisms and making this understandable to the modern day world. He took a trip to Mexico and Guatemala in 1979 as a backpacker, and he was alerted to the potential value of the ways of thinking of the ancient native peoples, and he has been hooked ever since. And, a lot of his more recent work we've heard a lot about as well. So you can find out more about him on his website. You can certainly find those links on my homepage here, as I said. And I just can't wait to discuss this book and the global mind field. Isn't that so relevant to what we're all being exposed to today, really, in one way or another, as far as information goes? Welcome, Dr. Calleman. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Hillary. I'm looking forward to this show as well. Thank you very much.
So when you decided to write this trilogy, what was it that prompted you to put this into book form?
Well, it is really funny with these kind of writing the books. If someone has not written a book, you might think that this is something that you think you have some good ideas, and then you want to write it down and so forth. But I must say, in my case, it's more like at certain points, it is like a book out there in the cosmos somehow that wants to be written, and it seems it was to be written by me, whatever I may be doing at that time. And so this is kind of what happened in this time. Also, I did start late in 2011, thinking that I would write a book of a new perspective of the future based on the Mayan calendar. But once you go into the Mayan calendar, you have to really sort of go backtrack, and you have to verify all the basic ideas that this really truly is sort of a time chart for how humanity evolves. And so you might say, and this is not the first time, it's probably the fourth time that I started to write in a book going back to the dawn of human history. And naturally, then you have to go into the Egyptian pyramids, which are these amazing structures that for everybody says, and I think that's probably true, that we couldn't even make them today. And but anyway, when I started to do that, it just sort of dawned upon me the insight that the pyramid, especially the Great Pyramid in Egypt, but several others as well, are really like reflections of a global mind. This is the time when humanity or human beings first start to have like linear structures around themselves. If you go back more than 5,000 years, you find it very hard to find truly straight lines anywhere. And so that insight that the pyramid in a sense was some kind of a divine mind that people then started to be in resonance with or downloading or something like that. That insight just struck me. And then once you have that sort of original insight, then you want to explore where will this lead me if I go on and study the rest of history, if I study other countries, other monuments that were built approximately at the same time as the Egyptian pyramids, etc., etc. And so then at that point, when you have that kind of a insight that you feel is coming from some higher place in the universe, it's difficult to stop. You simply have to explore all the possibilities that this gives rise to, and this is what happened to me. It's now soon. It's almost 3 years ago that I began with this particular trilogy, which it is.
It's fascinating. That's what it is. It's absolutely fascinating. In fact, when I got into the book and I started to read through it, it became very clear very quickly that this was a very special book. And, I'm always fascinated about how the journey begins for an author, how you get into the role of channeling such beautiful, coordinated information into one place. So thank you for writing it, first of all.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
You touched on something that's really relevant, and I think also I have to say that your background is an interesting mix of ingredients and combination of expertise and accomplishment to give you this kind of grand perspective, if you will, on these topics and how you see them. So basically, for the people listening who are just now learning about your book, perhaps, or if hopefully have had a chance to read it, where do you start when you explain this book to somebody? Do you start at the pyramids and you start with the resonation that comes from the pyramid and how it relates to consciousness and the human mind? You have a chapter in here that really goes into detail about describing the difference between the mind and the brain. And so maybe we can start there and just give people a little background on where you're coming from when you discuss this kind of resonancy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing it up this way, because this book sort of unifies two questions that have been previously been looked upon as completely separate. One of the questions is the question: why did civilization arise so suddenly and so dramatically, visibly, is at the same time in several different places on our planet about 5,000 years ago? That's something that it was like a quantum leap at that particular time. And so a lot of people have tried to suggested explanation to why that would have happened. Now, then the other aspects of the book deals with the relationship between brain and mind. And there it goes into another widely discussed issue, namely whether our brains are just sort of receiver for a universal consciousness, and then we are expressing this consciousness, or what is the viewpoint held by official science, official medicine, etc., where the viewpoint is that the mind is created by the brain. Now, these two things nobody has previously sort of tried to connect these two problems in our understanding of reality. But that's what I've tried to do here, and that's what the book is all about. And what I'm saying then is that we go all the way and realize that the mind is something that is not created by our brains. The mind is something we are in resonance with. If in the lack of a better word, you might say the mind is something that our brains download. And then what I'm suggesting then is that initial downloading of the mind happened at the beginning of the so-called long count of the Maya, which takes us back 5,130 years. And then things start to make sense, especially if you have the background in the Mayan calendar and know what kind of inscriptions they wrote in order to describe what happened 5,130 years ago. That's really what's so fascinating. And then you will see that the Egyptian pyramids that were built at that time, that their structure, it actually fits with the Mayan inscriptions of the kind of metaphysical change that happened at that particular point in time. So it's always, when you write a book like this or present a new material like this that is connecting to widely different problems, it's kind of hard it's just a new thing. It is a paradigm shift to make that connection, to see that the rise of civilization is actually the same thing as the downloading of the human mind.
So would it be fair to say then that the human mind activates the human brain, which then activates our human biochemistry, which then activates our experience with the world around us?
Yeah, I would say so, but it certainly activates the brain, and sort of the brain is sort of using the mind, or vice versa maybe. The mind is rather using the brain. But we did have a body and all the physiological processes long before we had a mind. But I think what happens when we downloaded the mind was that in lack of a better word, the mind may sometimes have screwed up the functioning of the body. A true natural body has only existed before people had a mind. But then there's a lot of aspects of the mind that may actually put our bodies off balance. This is not something I'm talking about in the first book here, but I am sure I will be in the coming volumes of the trilogy.
So would it be fair then to say also that because we live in a world filled with so many different artificial chemicals and medications and et cetera, that we are exposed to brain-changing type, events? So basically the filter becomes a little clogged, I would think. The global mind is trying to get through to the brain, and the brain is trying to hear it. They have this reciprocal relationship. How does what we're really exposed to as modern day culture affect that? Well,
that's what shall I say? That is, of course, a big thing. I think, in this context, the relationship between mind and brain, there is one aspect that I actually bring up in this book, and this is that because the predominating view in modern medicine is that the mind comes out from the brain, then the only logical conclusion that psychiatrists and many other doctors will draw, not all of them, but the official view anyway, is that in order to what shall I say, to heal the mind if it's somehow disturbed, then the only thing we can do is actually to medicate the brain. And I would say that basic assumption is false, because the mind is not coming from the brain. And sometimes it might be absolutely necessary. I cannot judge any particular case, but it might be necessary to use some kind of a medication. But what I think is very sad is that it's taken for granted. It's a flawed basic assumption that rules over psychiatry and medicine. And if we were to explore things from another perspective, from a more truthful perspective, that the mind is something that our brains are downloading, then I think we would be better off in terms of medications and so forth.
I think over the context of time, when we're talking about a time before when humans lived very simply and we weren't really dealing with all the modern day stuff that we have now. When you go back 5,000 years, you're dealing with a different kind of human. And then you have this influx of this event that you spoke of, that it was a metaphysical type event where people became, I guess you could say, more aware, more conscious. Something happened, there was an event, and we changed the course. Is that correct?
I had a little bit of a hard time hearing. Is there any way you can improve that? It sounds a little bit almost muted or so.
Yeah, I can. Is that better? I don't know. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah. Okay. What I was saying was, you had mentioned before that there was an event, some kind of metaphysical event that, was like a download through the mind, the global mind, into the human body. And then the human body, reacted and people changed, and there was this kind of event. So would it be fair to say then that it could happen again? I mean, we can go into that space, we can have some kind of download or some kind of influence from the global mind itself, cosmic mind, if you will, too, that will come in and help to change humanity for the better.
Yes. Well, yes. And we should add here, this is not the only event when there was a sort of a shift in a metaphysical structure that people downloaded. In fact, this was just the beginning of a wave movement that the Maya would refer to as the long count. And they would symbolize it with one of their favorite gods, the plumed serpent, which is it's a symbol of this particular wave that have developed civilization and developed the mind. And so whenever there is sort of a shift between a peak and a valley in this particular wave movement, there is also a shift in the human mind. And on top of that, to complicate further, in more recent times, there have been activations of new forms of the mind, you might say, new polarities of the mind. And every time there is such a shift, there is, with some delay, but not always with delay either, but usually with some delay, there is also a shift in how humans perceive the world and how they recreate the world. And the whole a basic assumption, you might say, when you're working with the Mayan calendar, is that it operates according to the principle of as inside, so outside. In other words, the initial shift is a shift in our mind. And then when the mind changes, then there is a change in our inner reality. And when our inner reality changes and our perception of reality changes, what then happens is that we're also changing the outer reality. In other words, we may start to change our technology, we may start to change our social relationships, and so forth. And so that, you might say, the biggest shift, which is so clear when you start to look upon it historically, is the one that took place 5,130 years ago now. But then there's been many shifts, and the shifts will be continuing. And I should say the big shift that happened in the year 2011, only a few years ago, meant that a new version of the mind, you might say, became downloadable. Version 7.386 or whatever. It's sort of that's how the Mayan calendar operates. With a shift point, it provides like a new version of a mind program, if you like. And we humans, we're usually not aware of this because it's sort of, to us, the mind is like the water is to the fish. We can't see anything without it. And so we don't normally, well, sometimes people do experience this, a shift in energy and so forth, but not everyone does that. And but when we look upon history retrospectively, we will see that the shifts in the human mind, it corresponds to the shift points in the Mayan calendar quite dramatically. And people start to think differently, people start to develop new technologies and so forth as a result of the shift in the mind, in the global mind.
So because of the shift in the global mind, we experience these epiphanies type Renaissance-like consciousness shifts.
Yeah. I would say, in my way of looking at it, consciousness is sort of a wider, it's almost like a field that connects everything. Whereas the mind is more of a particular human thing. And the mind is more something that separates. Whereas consciousness, it's, if anything, it's something that unifies. And so, when the mind was downloaded 5,000 years ago, it was actually sort of a dualistic mind that was downloaded. And that had all kinds of consequences. And from a modern standpoint, we could look upon those as both positive and negative. Whatever we like, it happened. That's the key thing to know. But this sort of the mind's ability to separate reality and distinguish and to discern, etc. It became the beginning point for to the use of metals, for the use of calendars, for the use of writing, etc., etc., etc. But that original mind that was downloaded 5,000 years ago, it was also a dualistic mind, meaning that it was like a yin-yang polarity. And if you walk around looking at the world through a yin-yang polarity, like if you have a pair of glasses where one you can see through completely and the other eye is like a dark filter, you will start to look at the reality in like good, bad, like the biblical metaphor for this is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's their metaphor for the dualist mind that came out of that downloading. But that dualist mind also created all kinds of imbalances, you might say, in society. Injustices, inequalities, where some would be the kings that were revered as gods and others would be slaves, etc. And it created this separation very much between the genders, because people walked around with these kind of glasses without even knowing it, and thought that, okay, this is how reality should be. We should not all be equals. We should be divided into this or that, etc., etc. So that is another aspect that I actually didn't talk too much about in this book, and because there is more to write in the future. But I just want to point out that you can look upon the dawn of the mind as a great thing, because it became the time when people started to build cities, pyramids, create art, science, etc., etc. But at the same time, that original version of the mind, we can call it version 1.0 of the mind, that also had a dualistic aspect, and that's the reason that society at the same time became quite full of injustices and so forth.
Would you say that our Earth is dualistic because we have night and day?
Once more, could you?
Would you say, because dualistic, a lot of people say that, we have dualistic minds, and getting rid of duality is part of our spiritual evolution towards becoming more conscious and humane people. But the earth cycles that we live in are dualistic in the sense that we have night and day. So we have these dark and light periods, and we go around and we kind of have these experiences that teach us dualism. Just by interacting with the natural world at times. So perhaps dualism is part of what we're supposed to learn how to find balance in.
Yeah. I think it's so important discussing all these kinds of matters to realize that the humans today are not the same humans as 5,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, and many other, or whatever time frame you're looking at, because the mind is an evolving thing, and that there is a time plan for the evolution of the mind. Now, sometimes people look at this duality today, and maybe they base themselves on old ideas, scriptures, and so forth about duality, almost as if it's a necessity or something like that. And what I come to conclude is that there is now a new kind of a mind that allows a new possibility for us to be what I call the ninth wave of the Mayan calendar system. And in that, duality is not dominating. In fact, it's a mind of unity consciousness, and I think we should actually, my view is that at the current time, we should really intend to be part of that particular mind or unity consciousness, and it offers a possibility that never existed before. And as we do, I think many of these philosophies that have been developed in the past around duality and so forth, they will sort of just be left behind maybe, because the world is changing, because our mind is changing.
I think that's great. I think the power of the change of mind can change the world. So if you can change your mind from like hate to love, right, we would be able to move into a different kind of mind that aligns us with the wonderful diagram you have in this book where you talk about the cosmic down into the earth, down into the human, down into the cell, down into the atomic structure. I think you nailed it with that one. It's really quite interesting how you have put this all together. So we change our mind, we end up being a download, a different kind of mind, changes the biochemistry of our body. We have a better life, perhaps. We don't have as much disease. Would you agree with that?
It's still difficult to hear you, I must say. But I think overall, I would say that if people are able to surf on this new wave that was activated in 2011, that brings a unity consciousness, if they intend to be part of that, to download that, to be in resonance with that, what that will mean over time is a world where people are happier. This cannot happen overnight by any means, but and Mayan calendar waves, they are sometimes quite long duration. But in the way I look upon it, the duality of the original mind that was downloaded 5,000 years ago was really also the source of, for instance, all organized warfare and all kinds of conflicts between different groups in society and so forth. And so if we are able to transcend that original mind and go into a new version of it that does not carry that kind of duality, I think I'm confident that the world will be a happier place. And the duality that we've been under for such a long time has also created a sort of a duality between ourselves and nature, and between ourselves and the animals, and between ourselves and the divine. And if we can transcend that duality, and that's where the Mayan calendar comes in with the ninth wave in 2011, that really tells us that this is possible. It will take work, it will take commitment, etc., but it is now possible. Then we will sort of automatically start to see that without the duality, we will see that if we hurt the nature or the earth, then we hurt ourselves. Not just like nice thoughts or something like that, but as an immediate reality that we're living in. And so that in this sense, yes, I believe the whole cosmic plan, as it's been outlined by the Mayan calendar, it's like it's like a divine plan for the return to the Garden of Eden or something like that.
I'm really fascinated with this idea of the wave that you talk about, the plumed serpent. You have this... when I was listening to you talk, I could see the visual of these kind of cosmic waves coming through, and the Mayans got it right. They were able to keep track of that. But it stopped. The calendar has stopped. So what do we do? Have we run out, or do we continue the measurement of that in other ways?
I couldn't. could you say the end at the? Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm sorry for the sound difficulties. I have my microphone on as high as it'll go, so I'm not sure what the problem is. But what I was asking is, now that the calendar has ended, do we continue on in our own way by measuring this happening, or did we catch the last wave?
Well, the way I look upon it, the calendar hasn't ended. It was just a very significant shift a few years ago. So it's not what's really new is that all the 9 waves of the Mayan calendar system are now active. They're all running. They're all running in parallel. And before 2011, the 9th wave was not activated. And before 1999, the 8th wave was not activated. But now all the 9 waves have been activated, and they're running in parallel, and they each carry a version, their own version of the mind, you might say. And so we are not forced to download any particular version. We can, there are people that might choose to stay with the older versions of the mind, but you can also choose the most recent versions of the mind, which is then brought to us by the 9th wave. And I'd like to say something about that with the whole issue of the calendar ending and so forth. And that was really a misunderstanding that many people had prior to the shift. And actually, I think if you stay with exactly the inscriptions that the Maya left behind, you're probably better off than if you have listened to many modern people talking about it, because you got all kinds of strange interpretations from people prior to the shift. Some people would say that the world would come to an end, and that's sort of the Hollywood version of it. And then there's a lot of people who said, there would be suddenly a birth of a new world. And actually, none of those ideas have any background in the Mayan inscriptions. But there is, and there is just one single Mayan inscription from ancient times that talks about what will happen at the particular shift point that we just passed. And before I say what that particular inscription is saying, I think we should really be astounded by the fact that in the late 7th century, about 1400 years ago, people then in the jungles of Guatemala would write an inscription about what would happen 1400 years into the future. It is like if you and I would now write an inscription in stone where we would talk about what will happen in the year maybe 3500 or something like that. But actually, that's what they did. They did write an inscription of what would happen. And that doesn't say that the world will come to an end. It doesn't say that a new world will be born. Instead, it says that, something that they call the 9-step deity. And the most immediate way of looking at that is that the calendar system is a 9-step. It's like a pyramid in 9 steps. And that particular entity or deity or something like that would then appear in its full regalia. That's what it says. In other words, that at the shift, all the 9 waves will have been activated. The full regalia of the 9-storied deity will appear. And that's what it said. And it doesn't say that any of these calendars would come to an end or any of these steps will sort of be lost or something like that. Rather, if anything, they will all be continuing these waves. But the remarkable thing is that the whole spectrum of different forms of the mind that is sort of part of the calendar system is now available for us. And to me, it means, it also means a choice that we've faced with here. But it includes then a form of the mind that is not dualistic, and that's a wave that has the highest frequency. It shifts very frequently. It shifts every 18 days. 18 common days, and so it sort of never really goes out of it's never really deactivated. It's in principle always available to us today.
What a great time to be alive.
Yeah.
What a great time to be alive. I mean, think about it. You turn the news on and we have all kinds of things going on, and we have Ebola, and we have ISIL, and we have all these things, but yet, if we don't focus on that and we instead focus our minds on what you are teaching or you're saying in your book, we have an opportunity to really experience that in new ways, don't we? We can experience that in new ways then if we decide to move into that mindset, yes? Looks like we lost him. All right, well, we're trying to get him back on the line, and we're going to try to dial him back in. I just have to say that this is really fascinating. I'm sitting here actually taking notes and listening to what he's saying.
Are we back? Yes, I think we're
so.
back.
Well, it's live radio. We have, we're at the mercy of technology here sometimes. It happens. Thank you for coming back on. Can you hear me better by any chance?
I hear you, but it's not perfect. It's still...
Okay. Well, we're having some technical difficulties, so I apologize to everybody listening and to you, Dr. Calleman. I was commenting, I don't know how much was heard, but I was commenting on the 9-wave diagram type events that you have tracked and broken down for us through the Mayan calendar, and how amazing it was that we received that 9th wave in 2011. And I was suggesting also, I was getting to that point of suggesting to people listening to go back to 2011 and to kind of track their life since 2011 to see, I don't know, what might have changed, transpired, what have been the major themes since 2011. What have you noticed about your own mind changing and being able to operate and work on different fields? Fascinating stuff. I would love for you to continue discussing that, the 9-step deity, and how these run in parallel and how we have continuous access to them should we choose. And you probably didn't hear me, did you?
Well, I did not quite hear you. I thought you said that I would continue talking about the 9 waves or so.
Yeah, please. Let's go ahead and continue with that.
Well, I think I've said as much as is possible on a phone interview like this. What I do when I emphasize with my own work is that, when it's really about verifying, really about evidencing that what I'm saying is really true. And what that means is really doing a very detailed and very profound historical analysis to see that there indeed is a connection between the shifts in human society, the shifts in human thinking, studying all the expressions of the human mind whenever there are significant shift points in the Mayan calendar. So I've done this work, which is the first volume of my trilogy, the Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, in order to for us to be a little bit more certain about what is to come in the future and what we may do at the current time. And it is, I believe, a completely new way of looking at history, where usually when we taught in schools, we taught about history as a sort of a number of battles and kings and inventions and religions and so forth. And there's no real context for it. There's no explanation really to why any of this is happening. There is no explanation as to why we today are living in houses and the whole society of computerized communications, etc., etc. The way it's been presented in our schools and in the official media and universities and so forth is that these are just a series of accidents. It just happened, but that whole view is completely flawed, and when you start to match the shifts in human society against the Mayan calendar, it becomes very difficult to deny that we're part of a time plan that evolves us according to some kind of an intention. I would say it is an intention of bringing us back to the unity state. But there is definitely a time plan, and that sort of makes us look upon life completely differently. And certainly what it does tell us is that also that there is like a higher meaning to life. At least there seems to be a divine time plan that guides everything. So how do you access that? Well, you tap into the I would say the most modern, the most recent versions of the mind. That's the way to become part of a meaningful life and becoming part of the divine plan as I look upon it.
So we align with that and we become better, humane humans.
So we align with that and what? And
we become...
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Hello. Yeah, I lost you again. I think this is
I don't know what's happening. I'm so sorry. Now I can hardly hear you, so maybe you hear me better.
Okay. I guess this is what they talk about as the Mercury retrograde playing in somehow.
And it's not even saying I'm connected to the studio, so hopefully I can hear you. So I don't know how this is working if I'm not connected to the studio and I'm hearing you. Anyway, I wanted to ask your opinion on the internet, and hopefully people can hear this. So the way the internet has evolved and how it has affected the human mind.
What has evolved, you said?
The internet?
The internet has evolved. Well, that's certainly part of this whole picture. I would say that the internet becomes available basically in 1992, and it's a significant shift in the Mayan calendar when this thing happened. But internet really starts to change in 1999 in the sense that then it becomes interactive. And it wasn't interactive for the first years, but then it becomes interactive, and you have all kinds of smart technology starting to be developed at this particular point in time. And so that really corresponds with the activation of a new wave, a new mind, you might say. You know, we in a sense, we do experience many of these things that are part of the smart technology and the internet and so forth as almost like they're not coming from us. It's like some other kind of a mind that is in operation. And that, I would say, it's a reflection of the fact that a new mind was activated in 1999, and since then we've had all this huge expansion of all forms of social media and interactive internet and smart technologies here and there and so forth. It really is very much a product of a new level of the mind, I would say.
Fascinating. Well, we're coming to the end of the hour, and I'd like people to get an opportunity to hear where you might be speaking next, or how they can reach you, or what you have coming up.
Well, at this moment I've started to write on my second volume of this book, which will be about healing and about altered states of consciousness. In other words, it's about how do we deal with the mind, because the first volume, it sort of looks upon the mind as really something that's just controlling us and determining our lives and so forth, and so the second book will really be about how to deal with the mind, and that will also include aspects of healing and why we need healing at the current time, etc., etc. So I'm all working with that at this time, and if people want to contact me, they can do that from either through my blog, or through there is also a place on my website where the little envelope that people can mail me and talk about what they would like. And that's my website. It is Calleman.com, CALLEMAN.com. And so that's where I would refer people. I have Facebook pages as well, but I always look upon my website as the primary source of contact. And of course, my book is available from my web page, but it's also available from Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or in principle anyone who wants to order the book.
Wonderful. The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, a novel theory of our origins by Dr. Johan Calleman. You can find a link here on Achieve Radio on my homepage here, or you can Google his website and get it in a variety of different places. It's a phenomenal book. It raises a lot of really dot-connecting events and good questions inside the mind and how we're all connecting and how synchronicity plays a part. Dr. Calleman, thank you so much for being here. I want to make sure that I thank you because I'm very grateful you could be here this evening with me and my listeners.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I enjoyed it, and I didn't. I'm not sure that I always heard perfectly your questions, but that also gave me the chance to say whatever I wanted.
Well, I don't do scripted shows. My shows are never scripted, so it's always organic and wonderful, and whatever's meant to be said will be said, and I always enjoy that. So thank you very much, and we wish you the best of luck in the trilogy and all of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap. End of the show. Well, I hate to see you go, but I'll be back next week. I have some great shows coming up. You can go to my Achieve Radio homepage and check out the upcoming show line. And I'm always here Thursday night, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Until then, namaste.